You have seen the classic Hollywood shot 1,000 times. The rugged cowboy, exhausted from the trail, dismounts his horse, kneels by a crystal-clear, babbling mountain stream, and cups his hands. He drinks deeply, splashing the pristine, icy water over his face, a symbol of the untamed purity of the American West. It is a beautiful, cinematic lie. It is a fabricated delusion designed to sell you a romanticized version of a biological hellscape. If a pioneer on the Oregon Trail in 1850 dropped to his knees and drank from a river, he was not quenching his thirst. He was consuming a microscopic cocktail of human feces, rotting cattle flesh, and lethal bacteria. The rivers and streams of the frontier were not resources of life. They were open sewers. They were the most efficient delivery systems for mass death on the continent. In the 19th century, water was a biological weapon, and thirst was the ultimate mechanism of execution. Today, we are going to perform a visceral audit of frontier hydration. We are going to look at the exact chemical and biological reality of what happened when the human machine ran dry, and the horrifying, putrid liquids our ancestors were forced to swallow just to keep the engine running for one more day. History is never what you think. Before we look at the water, we must understand the terrifying mathematics of the void. We must understand dehydration. The human body is an engine that requires water as a coolant and a solvent. A pioneer walking beside a wagon in the Nebraska summer is operating in an environment of extreme thermal hostility. The temperature is 100 degrees. The air is dry, stripping moisture from the lungs with every exhalation. Under these conditions, a human being sweating through heavy wool clothing loses up to a liter of water per hour. This is where the biological math becomes a death sentence. When you lose just 5% of your body weight in water, the architecture of your system begins to buckle. Your blood volume drops. It physically thickens, turning from a fluid into a slow-moving, sticky sludge. Your heart has to beat violently, struggling to push this viscous mass through your vascular network. At 10% water loss, the metabolic default accelerates. Your kidneys, unable to flush the toxic byproducts of muscle exertion, begin to shut down. Cellular waste builds up in your bloodstream. Your salivary glands run completely dry. Your tongue swells, turning black and cracking like dried leather, filling your mouth with the taste of your own oxidized blood. At this stage, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, reason, and disgust, is bypassed. The primordial brainstem takes over. The biological imperative to hydrate overrides every single psychological barrier you possess. You are no longer a civilized human being. You are a dying, desiccated organism, and you will drink absolutely anything to stop the cellular collapse. When the pioneer brain screamed for water, the most common source on the great migration routes was the Platte River. Over 500,000 people and millions of head of livestock walked the Oregon and California trails. They all followed the exact same path. They all camped by the exact same water. The trail was not a road. It was a 2,000-mile linear landfill. Think about the logistics of 500,000 humans and 2 million oxen, horses, and mules existing in a narrow corridor without a single piece of sanitation infrastructure. Where do the humans defecate? In the bushes near the river. Where do the exhausted, starving oxen die? They collapse in the mud on the riverbank, their massive, rotting bodies sliding directly into the water supply. The Platte River was famously described as too thick to drink and too thin to plow. It was a slow-moving, shallow ribbon of liquid mud, but it wasn't just dirt. When a pioneer dipped his tin cup into the Platte, He was skimming the biological runoff of every single wagon train that was miles ahead of him. He was scooping up a warm, brown Necro-Broth. It was infused with the liquefied remains of dead livestock, the alkaline dust of the prairie, and the fresh, uncontainable diarrhea of the sick. There was no boiling protocol. There was no filtration. A father would scoop this thick, foul-smelling slime, wait 5 minutes for the heaviest mud to settle to the bottom of the cup, and hand it to his children. They drank it because the alternative was the agonizing desiccation of their internal organs. They traded immediate dehydration for a delayed microscopic assassination. The true apex predator of the American West did not have fur or fangs. It was invisible to the naked eye. It was Vibrio cholerae. Cholera was the grim reaper of the frontier waterways. We think of it today as an upset stomach, a relic of the past. In 1850, it was an unstoppable, biological override of the human gastrointestinal system. When a pioneer swallowed that cup of contaminated river water, the bacteria entered the stomach. If it survived the stomach acid, it moved into the small intestine, where it attached itself to the cellular walls and deployed a toxic payload. This toxin fundamentally hijacked the chemistry of the intestinal cells, forcing them to open their biological floodgates. The pioneer's body was rapidly draining its own fluid reserves into its gut. The result was an explosive, uncontrollable diarrhea known as rice water stool, a completely liquid excretion composed of pure water, electrolytes, and the sloughed-off lining of the victim's own intestines. The velocity of this disease is horrifying. A healthy, muscular man could wake up feeling perfectly fine, take a drink from a contaminated stream at noon, experience the first stomach cramps by 3 o'clock, and be a shriveled, dead corpse by midnight. A cholera victim can lose up to 20 liters of fluid in a single day. The dehydration is so rapid and so absolute that the victim's skin physically shrinks, pulling tightly over the skull to create a living skeleton. Because the blood volume collapses, the skin turns a ghastly, bruising blue, a condition called cyanosis. The muscles, stripped of sodium and potassium, knot into excruciating, violent cramps that can tear the muscle fibers from the bone. And the most terrifying part? Cholera does not cross the blood-brain barrier. The victim remains entirely conscious, entirely lucid, trapped inside a rapidly shrinking, agonizing body, watching their own biology liquidate itself. When they died, they were buried in shallow graves right next to the trail. When it rained, the bacteria from their corpses washed directly back into the river, perfectly reloading the biological weapon for the next wagon train. It was an immaculate, closed-loop system of mass death. If you managed to evade cholera, the water held other, slower methods of torture. Dysentery, caused by Shigella bacteria or amoebas, was a constant companion on the trail. While cholera killed you with fluid loss, dysentery killed you by ulcerating your internal plumbing. The bacteria invaded the lining of the large intestine, causing intense inflammation, bleeding, and necrosis. The victim would suffer from agonizing cramps and bloody, mucus-filled diarrhea, slowly bleeding out internally while wasting away from an inability to absorb nutrients. And if you ventured into the pristine mountains, away from the muddy plains, you encountered a different deception. You might find a crystal-clear, icy mountain stream. It looks pure, it tastes perfect. But it is the home of Giardia lamblia, a microscopic parasite deposited by the feces of beavers and wild animals. They called it beaver fever. Once ingested, the parasite cysts hatch in your gut, attaching themselves to the walls of your intestines like millions of tiny suction cups. They block the absorption of fats and nutrients, resulting in weeks of sulfurous belching, severe bloating, and chronic, greasy diarrhea. You could drink the most beautiful water in the Rocky Mountains and still end up a hollowed-out, starving shell. What happens when there is no river? What happens when the trail crosses the high deserts of Wyoming or Nevada? The biological math demands water, and the human machine will resort to horrifying extremes to satisfy the ledger. When the rivers dried up, the pioneers relied on wagon ruts. Imagine a deep groove carved into the mud by the iron wheels of 1,000 wagons. A brief rainstorm fills this rut with an inch of tepid water. Over the next week, it bakes in the sun. It becomes a stagnant incubator. Mosquitoes lay their eggs. Flies deposit larvae. When a pioneer family reached this rut, they were often in the final stages of dehydration. They didn't see a puddle of maggots. They saw salvation. They wrote of clenching their teeth together as they drank, using their own teeth as a crude biological filter to strain out the wriggling maggots. They swallowed the slime, praying it would stay down long enough to hydrate their blood. But the most deceptive and lethal waters were the alkali pools. The water in these pools might look crystal clear, but it was highly caustic. Animals driven mad by thirst would sprint toward these pools, plunge their snouts in, and drink deeply. The heavily alkaline water would instantly react with the acids in their stomachs, causing violent, explosive bloating. A perfectly healthy ox could drink from an alkali pool and drop dead in its tracks within 10 minutes, its internal organs chemically burned and ruptured. Humans who drank it experienced immediate, searing pain in their throats. It was a liquid mirage, water that dehydrated you faster than the sun. To survive, pioneers learned to mix vinegar or citric acid into the water, desperately trying to neutralize the base chemistry of the poison before they swallowed it. If the water was a biological minefield, how did anyone survive the West? The answer lies in two chemical hacks, one intentional and one accidental: whiskey and coffee. Whiskey was biologically safe, but alcohol is a diuretic. It forces your kidneys to expel water. You cannot hydrate a working cowboy with whiskey. You will only accelerate his metabolic collapse. The true savior of the American West was coffee. The pioneers did not understand germ theory. They did not know what a bacteria was, but they knew that if they drank the water straight from the Platte River, they died. If they drank coffee, they lived. They thought it was the medicinal properties of the coffee bean. In reality, it was the thermodynamics of the campfire. To make coffee, you have to boil the water. The rolling boil ruptured the cell walls of the Vibrio cholerae and the Shigella bacteria. The fire sterilized the Necro-Broth. Furthermore, the dark, bitter, heavily roasted Arbuckle's coffee beans were exceptionally good at masking the foul, metallic taste of the alkaline dust and the subtle, sickening flavor of rotting organic matter. Coffee wasn't a morning pick-me-up. It was a decontamination protocol. The cowboy didn't drink coffee because he liked the taste. He drank it because his subconscious realized it was the only liquid that wouldn't result in his bowels liquefying before sunset. We turn on a stainless steel tap, and a limitless supply of perfectly clear, chemically treated, UV sterilized water flows into our glasses. We complain if it tastes faintly of chlorine. We complain if it isn't cold enough. We have completely decoupled ourselves from the visceral reality of the human machine. We have forgotten that for 99% of human history, water was not a right. It was a gamble. It was a predatory force that hid microscopic armies of destruction behind a shimmering, reflective surface. The Wild West was not conquered by the six-shooter, the telegraph, or the railroad. It was a war of biological attrition. It was a ledger where the cost of expansion was paid in liters of bodily fluid, expelled in agony by the side of a dusty trail. Civilization is not defined by art or law or architecture. Civilization is a water treatment plant. It is the invisible infrastructure that stands between your internal organs and the rotting, microscopic chaos of the natural world. When you strip away the Hollywood romance, you are left with the brutal, chemical mathematics of the frontier. You are left with a man on his knees, filtering maggots through his teeth, swallowing the liquid remains of the dead, just to buy his cells one more hour of function in the unforgiving sun. My name is Nathaniel Blackwood, and history is never what you think.